This is the end of the world. If life were suddenly to disappear from Earth, this is all we'd leave to mark our time here. Buildings crumbling into decay, what we fed upon, slept upon, survived upon. But life has not disappeared from Earth. Here, in one of the world's most inhospitable environments, man has paused briefly and moved on. But for a noisy and colourful cross-section of the animal world, this is home. This is Heard Island, Australia's westernmost possession, 4,100 kilometres southwest of Perth, Western Australia, and fractionally closer to Cape Town than to its mother country. Heard Island is basically a still active volcano. But it's much more than that. This is the story of Heard Island, and of an incredible journey by an adventurous group of people and the man who took them there.
Well, I was offered a job. I wasn't very well off financially. And the price sounded good. And I didn't realise quite what it was going to be.
As much as anything, it's the story of the ship herself. A ship challenged by the might of some of the biggest, toughest seas in the world. Day following night and day again with no mercy. It's a ship that sailed as no other in modern times has sailed. No other is likely to do. It's a ship that many experienced old sea dogs said could not do it and found hard to believe when she did. She's Chains 2, the ship that shouldn't have.
Okay, fellas, ready to go?
It's dawn in Hobart and the beginning of a pleasant summer's day in the Tasmanian capital. An amazing expedition is about to get underway. 17 passengers, ranging from an Australian botanist to an American ham radio operator to 4 mountaineers who have flown from their Austrian homes and jobs.
Now, what's this stuff?
All helping the crew of 8 of this joint venture to store food, fuel and other supplies for a 6-week voyage. They don't have any idea at this stage that 6 weeks are to stretch into 12 and that they'll know much more about the ship than simply where to store food, nor do they suspect that nothing will go as planned. This weather map tells the tale. A few hours south of Tasmania, and the seas erupt around the 54-metre vessel. In a force 8 gale with 8-metre waves, Chains 2 can only make 2 knots. Owner-skipper Bob Barnett, who is to suffer heart trouble soon, turns back.
Our main motor boat has broken away and has slid over onto the starboard side. So they put her stern to the wind and run before the sea, calm the motion down so we can resecure it. The other reason is that we will go back under Tasman Head until these fronts and gale warnings drop off.
As far as what's happened already and what weather report you see ahead of you, would it have been your advice to turn back anyway?
Yes, most definitely. Most definitely for cost reasons only.
How about safety?
And, well, safety's got to be considered too. Because last night we lost part of the boat deck. The sea crashed in and rolled in under the wing of the boat deck and blew us a 6x2 plane clean out of it. So, and there aren't very many people mobile around the ship at present. So,
Is she still capable of getting to herd, though, when you...
oh, no problems. No problems at all.
Have a good one. Look.
And we have the gyro compass here, and it gives us true north all the time.
Back in Hobart, the boat is secured, departure delayed by continuing bad weather,
It's pretty well equipped. You need all these things
Yes.
to do it properly, don't you?
and the Federal Minister for Science and Technology comes aboard.
How did you get onto this thing?
Oh, just luck, I guess.
He is soon to be replaced in a new election, but for now he chats happily with expeditioners and crew and sees value in the voyage.
It's good publicity so that Australia begins to understand
What it's like.
what it's like.
That's right.
It's one of our big problems. Australians don't understand.
Very remote area.
Back to sea, and expeditioners get their first real taste of deck work as they pitch in with unskilled but willing hands. Chains 2 has a new skipper, Captain Laurie McEwen, who has flown at short notice across the country from Perth. Captain Mack already has some quiet worries, but expedition leader Jim Smith from Australia's easternmost possession of Norfolk Island reflects the happiness of others and their expectations of achievement.
I think we've really got to make sure that we have the time now. We think we can do it. Sure we can.
The 4 Austrians hope to climb Heard Island's Big Bend. At 2,700 metres, the highest peak on Australian territory. It has been scaled only once before. For now, a little needlework on their gear. Needlework that is going to become vital to the return of Chains 2. Meanwhile, first mate John Boys is at the helm, finding that the treacherous waters off the southern Australian coast are not going to let him go easily. Despite the return stopover in Hobart, there's no sign of abatement with the storms of the south. They rage for days, defying the old veteran who challenges the seas once again. The Chains 2 has been built for this. Aft of her strong, high prow is a deceptively delicate waist, low and open to the sea's onslaught. While huge waves can tear away tightly bound drums of fuel, which then threaten to create havoc on deck as expeditioners and crew battle to re-secure them, those same waves cannot swamp Chains 2. She's built to ship tons of water and to shed it from her open waist with equal speed. Men and ship have again met the challenge and won. But Captain Mack is increasingly worried. The seas are calming, and while expeditioners are expecting smoother sailing to Heard Island, Captain Mack decides she's not going to make it with the fuel aboard. She's using too much. At 8 in the evening, he decides to return to Hobart again. Crisis talks are held, and 4 hours later, the ship that shouldn't have turns about yet again. Her destination, the West Australian port of Albany. For 24-year-old Dominique Ward, Albany is an unexpected and emotional homecoming. She's a West Australian, and it's her opportunity for a quick reunion with husband Sam. They share a secret from the entire expedition. Dominique is more than 4 months pregnant. Meanwhile, it's also an emotional homecoming for Chains too. She was the last of the active whale chasers out of Albany's Chains Beach whaling station, closed forever in 1978. Albany folk are still very close to those days. 63-year-old Finn, Bill Apple, was the mate on Chains 2 and was sad to see it all end.
Oh, a little bit.
Did that finish you at sea, or are you still working on the sea?
No, I finished.
What does it do to you to see the old Chains back here?
Hard to say.
How about you? How long were you on it?
I was worked on the 4 mainly. I only done a few day trips on this one. You know, mainly on the 4, the one that's over the station there. That's, you know, that's the main one that I did work on.
How do you feel now you see her back here?
Well, it's good to see her back in the shape she is.
It's too hard to resist the feel of the decks again, and the memories come flooding back. Before the world changed its needs and its attitudes, whaling was the lifeblood of towns like Albany. It had operated sporadically since the 1850s, but when Chains Beach started in 1952, it outlasted all the others. Whaling was tough and dangerous. From the days when men took after the Leviathan with handheld harpoons in longboats, it progressed to modern chasers with explosive harpoons. For Albany, at least, it was over too soon. Chains 3 was scuttled to provide a diving reef. Chains 4 is a rusting relic at the old station, now a museum. Only Chains 2 survives. No longer hunting, but carrying passengers who live easily with the ghosts of the old days as they head towards environmental research and a different kind of adventure in Antarctic waters. And here it's girls mixing with ghosts as they struggle to set a small sail on the foredeck of the old whale chaser. It's a rare sight, but a small hint of an even rarer sight to come. Of all the adventurers, none has come aboard quite so quickly as 30-year-old Canadian geologist Alison Green, who's been touring Australia.
Very spur-of-the-moment decision. I was in Albany, tea house, and I met 7 members of the expedition. We got talking about where they were going and what they were doing, and it turned out they had extra room on the ship, and I had the time, so decided to come along. No.
Alison will quickly become a seasoned sailor, although she's never been to sea before.
I'll give you this. Now look, you're following, chasing the compass that way, see? That's the ship. Gonna move to 235. Now,
Captain Mack decides that expeditioners must learn the rudiments of seamanship aboard the old steamer, and he takes advantage of a rare period of calm weather to hand the helm to 24-year-old Melbourne ornithologist Claire Speedy. She's a willing, if nervous, pupil.
Except the delay's so long, it takes...
that's all right.
6 seconds?
What, 6 seconds?
Would it take 6 seconds to respond, or...?
No. It takes maybe longer than that, but that's it. She's coming a wee bit the wrong way, isn't she? To this side.
Yeah.
She's put a wee bit that side. No, no, no.
Oh, right.
You want to go? She's coming this way, so you want to go that way. You got an idea? No, you're not. You're right. Where you at now? Oh, you're giving a lot of hell now. Take it back to midships now.
Yeah.
Now, near your midships. Okay? There she comes. That's your midships. The one with the rocket out. That's good. That's a beauty. Where she goes.
A bit of fun is knowledge that will later be very useful.
Not so hard.
See? Better that way, isn't it?
As will the use of pre-electronic navigation, such as the mate's sextant. But under the surface, trouble is brewing. The approaching storm that will turn cruise into crisis. It's starting here, deep in the fuel tanks of Chains 2, and Chief Engineer Peter Ashford is increasingly concerned as he goes through the daily dipping procedure. Peter knows that the rising seas to come will be just part of the storm. He doesn't like what he finds and begins a long series of discussions with Captain Mack, analysing fuel and water usage and distance covered.
0.66.
Chains 2 is not performing as everyone had supposed she should.
Well, it's 70 tons.
While fuel is apparently being burned up much faster, the vital water supplies for steam are also running critically low, but that is not apparent at this stage. While officers wrestle quietly with the problem, the voyage of Chains 2 is moving farther south. The seas proving another kind of hazard for the expeditioners doing their rostered duty in the galley.
Will we set up that week? Yeah, just one more.
The girls are having a reasonably easy time as galley duty goes, but everyone finds it a rough day at the gas stove, preparing meals for the 25 on board.
What do we want? Some bread. Oh, boy.
And in the mess, eating is a movable feast. The rhythm is unconscious, although it sometimes makes a mouthful a little harder to capture.
Bit of a rhetoric question.
And if a penguin happens to swim aboard for a lift a little way, he can teach everyone something about balance.
Who said the ship had stopped moving?
In these seas, balance is needed on deck as well, as crew members contend with the expected and the unexpected. Boatswain Frank Halliwell must move quickly to secure a cover on the hold before it opens to the elements. Frank could do with cover himself.
Heading out. Throw on me Christmas crackers.
Frank's storm is over with another change of clothes, but with the sunset comes the first sign of real trouble, a dramatic change of course, as mate John Boys calls the Perth Marine radio operator.
Course 250. My destination is now Kerguelen Island. My destination is now Kerguelen Island.
With morning, expeditioners learn they're on yet another new course for the French islands, whose main base is aptly called Desolation Island, and still 2 days steaming north of Heard Island. Captain Mack calls expeditioners to the mess.
I want to put you out your misery. Things have been bad over the past 5 or 6 days, which you probably don't know anything about. Put it this way, the ship burns water and oil, and both are crucial, and both are in short supply. The water was the best, the oil was the worst, so I decided to go to Heard Island first. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Kerguelen Island first, and then to Heard. And that would save me a double journey, saving 10 ton. But the figures got worse and worse. The water was no problem. Well, we got plenty of that, really. But the fuel was getting less and less. You know, when you dip a tank, you expect another 3 tons, and you get 2. It never went the other way around. It always went worse. Until yesterday, there was no hope of us returning from Heard Island. We get about 2/3 of the way, less than that, and burn right out. And that I couldn't allow to happen. So we had a choice to make. My choice was the thing must be abandoned totally unless we get fuel. Now, where the hell are we going to get fuel? One was Kerguelen Island, which we all knew, the clients knew, I knew, the mate knew, that if we got fuel in Kerguelen, it'd be a flaming miracle, because they won't give it to you. There's only one thing, could we get fuel on the way back? So I phoned up Bob last night, put him in the picture, and his agreement was that the expedition must go on, that I will get fuel, he will come with fuel to me and rendezvous at sea to carry on. Now, people might say, do you trust Bob? If Bob doesn't turn out that fuel, he'll be up for criminal negligence, never mind anything else. He's got to turn up. And I'm feeling a lot better, because it's not a case of we're a bit short, we can do this, maybe. Now I know we can carry on thing. If we use a bit more fuel, there'll be more fuel coming. See, so I'm happy now. For the first time in, what, a week?
A greeting in these chilly French waters from black-browed albatrosses, Dominican gulls and other seabirds enjoying the knifing sub-Antarctic winds. From the mainmast, our greeting to the French as the flag run up from sheeting material by the bosun's wife Vicky flutters courteously for our unexpected hosts. These are the Kerguelen Islands, the biggest of France's Antarctic bases, nearly 4,000 kilometres from Australia. And more problems, a steam link to the winch fails. The anchor chain must be fed out by hand, and the anchor dropped. It's no easy task, and even experienced seamen like young Graham Dryden, a third-generation whaler, is taking no chances as he fingertips the limb-shattering chain around bollards.
Are ready for the painter? How are you?
The French come aboard. One is a marine biologist, Michel Panous. The other, the doctor of the base, Jacques Sadar. Here, everyone pitches in for what must be done.
Hello. Bienvenue à Kerguelen.
Dr. Sadar spends much of his time treating injured Soviet fishermen.
Ils auraient besoin de 70 mètres cubes d'eau. 70 mètres cubes d'eau. Est-ce qu'on peut les fournir à la base ou est-ce qu'ils doivent aller à Hopeful, à vous?
De toute façon, il faut qu'on les fournisse à la base, hein.
Today, he's telling his base of the need for water on chains too.
Il y a que le port qui peut m'enseigner. Écoutez, je vais m'enseigner auprès du port et je vous rappelle parce que je ne sais pas. Hein. J'avoue que c'est encore un détail que j'ignore.
Bon, d'accord, on reste en veille, là, on attend votre réponse, alors.
A water line comes from shore, and filling the vital water tanks for steam gets underway. Expeditioners are guests of the French who bring them ashore in small dinghies, providing food, wine and a tour of facilities, as well as greetings from the local population of elephant seals. Kerguelen has about 120 workers. Some are scientists, some are soldiers. Much of these islands is forbidden territory, and any activities outside the small settlement are hidden. At the settlement, sealed off from the bleak terrain and even bleaker weather, marine biologists, geophysicists and meteorologists are working on a number of important projects. The laboratories are well equipped, and scientists include a young American marine biologist working on several projects. He's James McClintock.
Specifically, we're down here working with echinoderms, which include the starfish, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, etc. We have also become interested in looking at reproduction and feeding in penguins as well, the king penguin down here. And in addition, we have done some studies on the intertidal organisms that live here.
Well, the major question for most people is, what use is this to the world?
Well, I think that the Antarctic regions offer a very unique environment to look at the biology of the Earth. They're areas which have not been influenced by man to any great extent. They're areas where the marine life in particular is extremely rich, extremely abundant.
And more importantly, the possibility of producing fuel from algae.
The algae that's being considered for producing methane is this large species Macrocystis, which you may have seen along the coast here, these large beds of algae. And in California, it has been attempted to go out and harvest the algae and then produce methane gas from the algae, and as a potential fuel source, yes.
Microbiologist Daniel DeLille is more concerned with the problems of modern fuel. His research involves testing microorganisms that can break down fuel spills. France appears to have solved the problem, as the tests here by Michel have shown 80% dispersal within a week. These flasks show various stages, including one without the microorganism and one that has it. The method is top secret, but probably to be available to the world within 6 months. Secret research notwithstanding, Chains 2 can't stay out of the picture for long. In the sandy-bottomed harbour, she's dragged anchor and gone aground. The French have tried a rescue mission, but have written her off. She can't be saved, they say. But there's no stopping her.
Bravo!
Close to a watery grave, she suddenly finds a freak wave to hoist her from the rocks. Once more, Chains 2 masters the fickle seas. She steams forward, passing the huge Soviet trawlers hugging their mothership in the protective lee of Kerguelen. French dinghies bounce back and forth between island and steamer with loads of expeditioners and crewmen for some mobile re-embarkation. And at last, so far from Australia, the expeditioners really believe they'll reach their destination. The mountaineers, with fresh determination, do practice runs up the rigging to the crow's nest and other improvised exercises. The Australian vet, Dr. Rob Jones, tells why he came.
It's just the excitement of the adventure. That's my primary purpose. And I'll be looking at the birds mainly, and looking at to see if I can find any sort of disease-causing agents in them, to see if any of these might produce mortalities in the birds on the island.
Would that be applicable to anything outside of Heard Island?
Yes, it is. I'll be looking at not only disease agents that can affect the birds, but also disease agents that can affect man. And a lot of these birds migrate from these islands to Australia, so they could be coming in contact with man and our domestic poultry.
And Captain Mack ponders his strange cargo, as he calls passengers.
Yes, I've carried some idiots around the place.
What do you think of this cargo?
General, you know, mixed cargo.
Having a bit of fun with them?
Yes, I discussed this before I left. My daughter was saying at least we won't be talking about old sailors' yarns. There's a lot of interesting people around here. And maybe that keeps my sanity.
What intrigues you most about some of the people? What are some of the things that have thrown you off a bit?
Well, why people can be interested in such amazing things like a excreta from a penguin, some bugs in the island and things like that. I mean, this island is just a bit of desert rock and you don't think people go look at it and things like that. It's, well, it's not my kettle of fish. I couldn't do a job like that, but each man to his own pleasure and job.
Nordwestgrad die Querung ansetzen, so hoch wie möglich, herein zum Couloir vor oder nach dem Little Matterhorn.
The Austrian's job with Australian immigration official Peter Hardy is to scale Big Ben.
Peter, Leopold and I are going to explore this first part, coming up Smith Glacier and then having a traverse in the Little Matterhorn.
Does Peter Hardy, a 44-year-old father of two from Canberra, put himself in the same class as his companions?
Well, certainly not in the same class as Bruno, who's climbed all over the world, no.
Where have you climbed?
New Zealand and France.
Ever had any difficulties?
Well, no insuperable ones.
Are you confident to have Peter along with you?
Oh yeah, we know him now all the time from Hobart to this place, and I'm really sure he is experienced and strong enough to keep up with us.
Everyone is happy and confident, but is Captain Mac? Is she going to make it to Herd Island at this stage?
Of course she's going to make it.
She's going to make it back?
She's got to. I'm not afraid of it. These things are sent to try. As you say, you know, you do the hard things, the impossible you achieve, and miracles take a little bit longer.
This is a miracle?
It will be if we get back.
Suddenly, it's there. Herd Island, her outline on ship's radar, making her real. The first party is ashore and has begun to transfer tons of equipment for the 2-week stay. It's made more difficult by the fact that the bigger motorboat will not start and must be used as a barge towed by a small aluminium runabout owned by young engineer Danny McLaughlin. The runabout toils for hours as the weather worsens, and the half-mile haul from shore to Old French Hut takes its toll on expeditioners. How do you feel? How do you feel?
A bit tired. It's pretty hard going in the sand.
This is hard. It's cozy.
Further down the coast at Mechanics Bay, the mountaineers are farewelling Danny after he's delivered them to their base camp. Ahead of them, one of the worst mountaineering experiences of their lives.
It was extremely windy in the morning, loads between 42 to 45 kg, and it was very, very difficult to proceed under these circumstances with this heavy load and this heavy storm. sun has to be reached due to the heavy winds at a height of about 100 meters, because it was impossible with these heavy loads to proceed further on. So with the wind we had to leave towards the west.
It was very difficult walking on the glacier with the heavy winds because you could never be sure that a sudden gust of wind might blow you towards a crevasse, and it was quite difficult to keep one's balance with the heavy packs we were carrying and the very strong winds which would come in extremely strong gusts. We estimate 100 kilometers an hour or more at times. So we made a camp at quite a low altitude because it was necessary to find shelter that first day.
We've got a beautiful downtown Edo. That's the pubs up.
No pubs, but a huge open-air supermarket. The Australian Antarctic research occupation of this island from 1947 till 1955 left many relics of human habitation. Succeeding expeditions have left their own unneeded supplies. It's debris with a difference. Aviation fuel drums with aviation fuel. Gas cylinders with gas. The bleached remains of a base hospital strewn with such refrigerator-fresh items as morphine, cotton wool, pethidine, sodium bicarbonate, aspirin, and a coffin. All a statement on the hardships of Antarctic living. There are dozens of loaves of bread, looking edible, but not. Kiwi polish. There are inner and outer soles, boots, capes, American canned chili, ice cream mix, boneless turkey, cranberry sauce, French canned items such as beurre aux carottes, potage de légumes Saint-Germain au pois, and gelée de groseille. There's wire, wood, tools, soap, toilet paper, paint. It's an endless and fascinating game of spot the luxury, as almost everything is edible or usable, and ultimately it's just depressingly desolate, telling its own story of struggle, achievement, abandonment. But Heard Island is not depressing. Its reaches beyond this small ruin are awesome, all 40 kilometers of it. And while human life is and has been an intrusion, life's rich cycle goes on. Babies, gentoo, penguin or otherwise, must be fed, even if mothers fed up.
There. This is an automatic weather station for the Met Bureau in Melbourne. They've asked us to replace it since the battery of the old one was running low. The battery should last now for another 3 to 5 years. It transmits the barometric pressure from this location via satellite back to Melbourne. So since this is such a rare location, the pressure might give some indication of fronts coming towards us from this region.
Stuart Youngans of the Antarctic Division on a vital weather link. But on Big Ben, behind him, a more pressing problem with the weather, and our mountaineers battle on.
It was too windy to carry all the very heavy loads the second day again, so to be in a position to struggle against the heavy winds, we took less loads and went twice. It was in a height of 600 meters, and Peter was digging the ice cave up there while Leopold, Werner and I went back to fetch the rest of the material to bring it up to Camp 2. Then we had a very wet night in this Camp 2 because this ice cave was dripping with water. We decided to leave some of the outfit at Camp 2 and use the remaining good weather to make a strong push towards the summit and to reach a relatively big height with less luggage, and could establish Camp 3 at a height of 1,470 meters.
On our way to Camp 3, we donned skis and skied for most of the way from Camp 2 to Camp 3.
The ice climbing was really pretty difficult, not because of the steep parts, but because of the ice conditions. On this day it began to start with warm weather, and had been because ice cave was dripping and so on Camp 2. So it was not really freezing during night, and also ice conditions were very soft, and therefore the steep parts a bit dangerous.
Men who climb mountains are only a problem if they come down and start behaving like tourists. Why are these strange men following us? Can't a fellow get some sleep? Ignore them, gentlemen. I certainly will. And so they do. And the expeditioners find the scenery overwhelms them at every turn, all on too vast a scale to comprehend. Here, the Jaca Glacier flowing from Mount Olson on the Lawrence Peninsula at the west end of Heard Island. Only the sight of two crew members exploring the rocky ground can give some idea of its expanse. These glaciers are visually stunning, but physically killers. This is a harsh climate. The terrain is rugged, and a lone grave marks a tragedy where one Australian was killed by waves on a beach and his companion died while trying to cross a glacier to safety. Here on Heard, it's midsummer, which usually doesn't mean much, as temperatures are at 0 or lower, and winds and violent storms always a threat. But an unusually mild spell has made conditions below pleasant, and high on Big Ben, increasingly dangerous. The mountaineers are in trouble. Big Ben is melting under their feet. For Harold Heatwall, Professor of Zoology at the University of New England in New South Wales, this is a fine day for a much-needed scrub down. Behind him, the towering presence of Big Ben appears solid, but three Austrian mountaineers and their Australian companion are facing what Hal would welcome, too much warmth.
I see them.
Suddenly, there's a surprise call from nearby.
I see the four mountaineers. They are at the bottom of the little Matterhorn.
Dr. Walter Flor, one of the Austrian party who had to abandon the climb himself, has spotted the mountaineers for the first time. How far would that be from the top now?
It is nearly halfway.
As we talk, climber cameraman Werner Hölzel takes a moment from above to zoom in on our distant settlement camp, from which Walter has his deceptive view. Hal continues his bath under Big Ben's eye. Is the weather good for them at the moment up there?
It is very good because it is nearly no wind, and you see it is a good sight.
As we had 3 days of fair weather and looking forward to another good day, hopefully, we said, well, let's try with a very strong push to reach the summit next day.
There is a very difficult passage now on the way, about 300 meters of difficult ice climbing.
The ridge consisted of some rather weird ice formations, including a number of quite steep ice towers that were quite sometimes too steep for us to climb over, and we had to traverse around the side of the towers.
What time do you think they should make it in?
Hopefully they will make this hard climbing today until evening.
Before us was a steep slope. It was not very steep actually, 45 to 50 degrees, but too steep for the moment, for the present ice conditions. We did not dare to continue because all the crevasses leading towards the ridge broke, and we saw at this time avalanches on the north west side, which we had to traverse, and we just didn't dare it under these conditions.
It was almost a continuous thunder of avalanches at that time from the cliffs on either side of our ridge.
The weather is a fickle companion on Heard Island, and here at Atlas Cove, it's about to wreak havoc on another group of expeditioners.
Top one. Pull!
Yeah, you pull. Ready? Going up again, folks. Pull, Claire! Pull, Claire! Pull, Dominic!
My fingers are just about to drop off.
The ham radio operators have called in help to raise their biggest antenna as they prepare for their worldwide ham connections.
No worries. Oh, it's going up.
Oh! Claire, your top one.
Right. Top one. Pull your top one a bit down. Top one. Wait. Top, Claire. Top.
Hang on.
Come on, kid. Right, you're going to lose it. Jeremy, help her. I can't let go of this one. No, walk around, Jeremy. So much for the Manuka antenna. Well, we tried with PH3. Get straight and put it up? Nope. Wrote it off.
The hams are finally on the air. Their hut clinging to the bleak hillside, their antennae filling in for the ruined one. And a wall of sound invades Heard Island.
The problem is, since it's unoccupied, everyone must wait for a radio amateur to come here. The last operation was, I think, in 1980, and was only a few contacts were made before the fellow's radio broke down. So everyone, this 20,000 amateurs around the world, have been waiting their chance to talk to us here.
Kilowatt Tango Papa, go ahead. Site 5, sample 4, okay.
Meanwhile, other activities are well underway around the island. Hal, Professor Harold Heatwall, is with his assistant Dominique collecting specimens.
Okay. Have you seen any of the wingless flies, Don? They live down in these cabbages. Oh, yeah, there's a couple of them. See that? They're just like a fly, but have no wings at all. On an island like this, it's so bloody windy, if they As soon as they get up out of the cabbage, they'd blow away. So everything on the island either lives under something or in something, and they can't use wings. They'd just be blown away. They often are down in those places, and they eat the organic matter that accumulates in the cabbage leaves. I don't think they eat the cabbage. Cabbage is edible for humans, though. It's good stuff. Have some. Tastes like mustard. If you were stranded here, you could get your veggies this way. Do you like it?
Like coleslaw.
Sort of like cabbage, but stronger, more like mustard.
Dr. Jeremy Smith, also from the University of New England, is measuring marine plant life.
The more we can understand about the ways in which these organisms are zoned, the sort of factors that control them, the better we can teach, I suppose. Certainly this is a variant on a very common theme, but a very unusual variant here at Heard Island. I'm collecting specimens of most of the animals and plants that I'm finding on these shores for confirmation of their identity. There are, I think, one or two which have not been recorded before. They may well be new to science. In particular, a very tiny little species of insect, a sort of mite, which I've been collecting on the top of the shore. There are very few limpets and winkles and the sort of things, barnacles and so on, that one associates with rocky shores elsewhere. Instead, some of the terrestrial animals appear to be coming down into the shore, into the intertidal zone, much more than one might expect, such as this mite and a small species of beetle, the sort of insects that really don't belong here at all. We can begin to see which factors are more important in controlling the distribution of organisms, which factors are actually preventing some animals and plants from living at different levels on the shore or permitting others to live, and thereby giving us more understanding of the whole environment, which of course would have relevance to other shores as well. One can presume that the climate is either warming or getting drier, most probably getting warmer, because the glaciers are retreating. They're much smaller than they were even just a few years ago. The snouts of the glaciers are climbing uphill, as it were. So there appears to be some warming of climate in common with most of the rest of the world, and this is just one indicator here in Heard Island.
The hams are locked away on their hillside, maintaining their around-the-clock bid to make as many international contacts as possible. Jim Smith is happy that they can make 15,000.
I always compare it to collecting anybody who collects something like stamps, and Heard Island is the unattainable, because unless somebody is here, and of course more particularly unless that fellow happens to be a radio amateur as well, there's no way in the world he can get that Heard Island.
And the permanent residents of Heard Island pay scant attention to all these newcomers and their strange activities, although sometimes it comes a bit close to home. Canadian geologist Alison Green has been asked to help sample Heard's waters for Professor Frank Mercer of Sydney's Macquarie University. She's taking diatoms.
Diatoms are very simple algal plant life. The relevance is that this island is so isolated and it's such a new environment, it's been glaciated recently, that they're interested to see which ones have developed here.
Have most of the diatoms and other things here evolved here or migrated here?
Primarily migration, because the island has been completely covered with ice so recently.
So it's in fact a very young island?
Yes, it is.
Looming all around these scientific activities, the silent splendor of Heard Island, from her 12-million-year-old volcanic debris to her distinct landforms and unique biological features. But Heard Island is warming up. Her glaciers are receding. With weather like this particular period, those waterfalls are growing bigger and wilder by the hour. This, of course, is a short-term phenomenon. The island is warming over thousands of years, but warming. In this immediate period, the sculpted beauty of an ice cone fountain on the Bodasang Glacier is a harbinger of trouble high up on Big Bend behind the glacier.
If it would have frozen, it would have been very easy then to reach the summit. It was not a situation to throw our lives away. We then had to make the decision whether under similar circumstances as last day, because it wasn't chilling down during night, we would proceed or not. But of course it was no chance this day to proceed, so we would have to wait another day or 2 days. But we were so thoroughly wet that it was no chance to wait there, so we decided to descend down to Camp 3 and wait there, where we had more spare clothing and more food and so on, to wait there for another chance.
Few sights and sounds can be as dramatic as Roger's Head on the coast, a huge rookery of the feather-headed macaroni penguin. There are perhaps 2,500 here, and a count 30 years ago produced a similar amount in exactly the same area. The macaronis aren't fazed by Professor Heatwall and his soil sampling.
I wonder how many years these penguins have been here. It must be feet deep. If any of the soil on this island should be full of bacteria and things, this should be it. It's pure organic matter, just about.
Hal expects to find mites in this soil and says there are 8 species of one, the springtail. The specimens he takes back to New South Wales will provide research work for 5 people for at least a year. When the professor and Dominique begin the climb back up the cliff, they provide some idea of the scale of this area. Meanwhile, giant petrels settle in awkwardly after their effortlessly soaring flights. Skuas, the ugly but necessary scavengers of the island, battle over a piece of dead penguin. Unlike vultures, the skuas do attack living penguins, as well as feeding off dead or ailing seals. But the penguin isn't always easy prey, and certainly stands up to the tentative advances of skua and petrel. Their shared habitat is a constant Cold War confrontation, an uneasy environmental alliance. Ornithologist Claire Speedy is a swift penguin catcher, and Dr. Rob Jones, a 38-year-old vet with the Victorian Department of Agriculture, a skilled worker.
Come on. A little grazing. solid muscle. Oh.
He takes blood samples and fecal swabs from 100 penguins. The object, to see whether they're susceptible to Australian poultry diseases or a risk to poultry. As well, whether they're carriers of anything that could affect humans. It could be easy. There are so many, and they're in intimate contact with birds that reach Australian shores. It's the first time such work has been done on Heard Island.
You put him down near the water?
No, just let him get up.
He's right. Never minds much.
Claire is here to check on numbers first recorded by her boss Max Downs 30 years ago. She checks 4 penguin types: Gentoo, Macaroni, Rockhopper and King for Max Downs.
He was here in 1951 and 63, and he noted that there were no breeding gentoos on this part of Wolf Point. And since then, they've appear to have recolonised the area. There's downy chicks here, so it shows that they're breeding. The theory is that back in the early years of the Inari occupation here, they had huskies, and the huskies used to roam around here and they chased the gentoos away.
Is there anything different about the way they're colonising here? There are different penguins.
Yes, well, this seems to be a feature of most gentoo colonies. Everyone we've looked at all around Heard Island have had 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 king penguins amongst them, and they seem to be totally oblivious to all the other species around them. The king penguins, of course, they're recolonising. That's been noted over the last 10 or so years. Their numbers are increasing.
Are conditions here improving for penguin breeding?
Oh, it appears that they must be, yes.
Having young ones is again the norm here after periods where seals and penguins were wiped out or severely depleted. Fur seals have increased significantly. So have king penguins. Both were almost extinct, but the snooty kings picking a path through the gentoo rabble like medieval courtiers are certainly a strong presence now. The kings are also curious about another rare bird's rookery. Dominique continues to carry her heavy loads, do equally heavy work, and her shyness surfaces about her 5 months pregnancy. It's a long, hard haul, especially when you're pregnant. Do you find it tough to do what everybody else is doing?
No comment, no comment.
You find it very hard to carry on as everyone else is?
Yes, rather.
Also a rare sighting, cormorants with chicks. Perhaps the most unusual aspect of Heard Island is that, like the delicate but deadly diving Antarctic tern, here after the tiny shrimp-like krill, everything feeds on the sea and not the land vegetation, like the spongy moss-like azarella and the poa grass. But humans have to return to Earth for food, even when they're up in the clouds like Hal Heatwall, cloud-bound on the Bodasang Glacier.
The colour of the blue ice is unbelievable, isn't it? Oh, it's beautiful. It's incredible. Some of the peaks at the top with pools of clear blue water at the base are extraordinarily beautiful. Fantastic. It's fairly easy climbing to get up to the base of the steep part.
You seem to have finished all your scientific work. Why is that?
Well, I wanted to collect samples in each of the major habitats, and there aren't that many habitats here, and we've done those thoroughly. And even with 2 really good days and pushing it, I could have just about done it.
We've had good weather already.
We've had good weather, and now if the bad weather socks in, I've finished anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Great for Hal, but high above him, Big Ben has beaten the mountaineers.
A very heavy wind came and tore the fly sheet off our tent, and the snow from the slope, it always came on our tent and pushed it down, and the wet snow wetted everything inside the tent and made it really swimming everything in the tent. It was just a lake in there. We had to decide to leave the tent, to leave Camp 3 downwards, because we realized that there was really no chance left. But unluckily, during our descent in the area of the Matterhorn, we were caught in very heavy wind again, the snow being very soft, and the crevices, the hidden crevices are therefore very dangerous. We had to be very, very careful, and after 2 hours searching for the way down, we proceeded to a big crevice and climbed down into the crevice, and were able, luckily, to build up our tent in there, digging a platform out of the steep slope, and decided to wait there for better weather.
So we cut a platform into the wall of inside wall of the crevasse, big enough to pitch a tent. So there we were in our tent inside the crevasse.
And below, as the chilly night closes in, expeditioners prepare for their nightly sausages in a row sleep.
I'm in there, yeah.
About time we went to sleep, you fellows. How about switching off these bright lights, eh? That's better.
Time to go, and Heard Island's perverse weather makes it a farewell to remember. The crew has helped the visiting yacht Anaconda 2 to load some vital stores, and Chains 2 and Captain Mac give her what should have been a final farewell. But that dinghy, which has helped Anaconda and is soon to pick up the mountaineers, changes that. While the mountaineers wait, wet and cold, at their eastern base at Mechanics Bay, the dinghy breaks loose in the gale. Chains 2 maneuvers are reminiscent of her whale-chasing days. Eventually, the dinghy is hooked, a line is being secured, when the rising seas prove too powerful, tearing her away forever. Captain Mac decides further rescue attempts will put the ship and her people in danger and abandons the final lifeline. It's now that Anaconda 2 and her skipper Josko Grubich repay a favor.
Yes, Anaconda.
Anaconda say we're just about now to go pick them up. You will have to pick them up from here, and then you will have to come a little closer.
I am coming up to you, up to where you are now, to pick up the men from the Zodiacs. Over.
You will pick them up from the Zodiac here. Is that what you're saying? Over.
Yes, over.
A rendezvous in pounding seas. The two vessels dance around each other.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Over. Give us full speed. Come on. 85 revs.
Ashore, Anaconda's motorized dinghies begin the hazardous transfer of men and equipment. First back safely is Leopold Kren, who lays cobblestones in Viennese streets when he needs to earn mountaineering money.
If the weathers are better, we were very wet. Completely wet. The things were very wet, and clothes, everything was wet. And if it was colder, we froze then. And now we turned back, and we were waiting for 2 days for colder weather, dried things, and then it was always warm again. In the night, it was perhaps 2 degrees minus, not more. We wished it must be colder. We want 10 degrees, 50 degrees minus. That must be good.
Are you disappointed? Are you disappointed?
No, not so.
You did very well.
Yeah, but we can't make more.
From the dinghy, our mountaineering cameraman, Werner Hölzel, keeps filming. A rural mechanic with a passion for films and mountains. When he's returned safely to Chains 2, his sodden camera is his first concern.
Almost lost it.
Oh. Oh. Yeah, good. Got it there. Ooh.
It's wet.
Good, very good.
At last, all four, Werner, Leopold, Bruno, and Australia's Peter Hardy. With everyone aboard grateful for the presence of Anaconda, saving our men from being trapped and exposed on the island, it's time for a real farewell to the yacht and the journey home. What is to be a most amazing voyage. And so it's come. Chains 2 has only a few days' fuel and will keep it for an emergency. Now it's sailing time. All capable hands have been stitching tatterdemalion tarpaulins from trucking companies and welding old bars scavenged from Heard Island. The 790-ton steel whale chaser is about to offer herself to wind and current under sail. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Peter Ashford and his mate Danny McLaughlin are shutting down.
You'll do that for a while.
Peter Ashford, never in such a situation before, tries to hide his professional pain.
I feel we've managed our resources to the best of our ability. It's as simple as that. No further comment.
At the helm, spinning the big wheel abaft as his shutdown has taken all power from Chains 2's bridge, the chief engineer. And by day, Danny. The mate, the bosun. And as the hours slide by in the eerie stillness, expeditioners are to do their 4-hour watches, their increasingly skillful hands holding Chains 2 and her people on course. A telltale shows wind direction, a small compass on the deck the only other guide, with the stars at night. Everything available is pressed into service, including the infamous tea towel. It's not long before the weaknesses begin to show.
Well, we had to make use of what resources we actually had, and fortunate enough we had ample supply of canvas on board, and as you can see up there, we've made use of it. We've had the whole crew involved in the sewing, and the passengers right down to the crew itself. It's been a full-time job trying to keep those things flying in strong breezes, but we haven't done too bad.
Yeah, quite a few years ago you learned how to stitch this kind of thing. Did you find you'd forgotten it and that you had to think hard to bring it all back?
Well, I had to think for a while. There's a lot of trial and error there for a while, and I was making a few mistakes for a while, but it all comes back to you after a period of time, and quite a few homeward bounders for a while there.
What sort of winds can they take? I mean, you've had them up maybe, what, a day or two before they've come down for repairs?
Well, we get 20 knots, so we're pushing our luck. 25 just a bit too much. We've actually been quite fortunate. We've had these sails up for the last 24 hours, which is just about a record for us. So just a general bit of tidy up in the morning, bit of deck work and resetting.
When you set sail in a steamship, did you ever think you'd end up doing this?
No, I certainly didn't, no. When you've got to put a palm and needle in your hand, serving mallet, things like that, spicing, it's just coming back to the old sailing ship days where you've got to start using your nuts for a while and thinking back 20 years.
What sort of feeling has it given you to be able to do this and get us as far as we've got with sail?
Well, it gives you quite a bit of satisfaction in some ways, the fact we've actually got so far and we've achieved so much. Is, you know, you get a lot of knockers like, and we've actually proved a point that we can actually sail this vessel with what resources we...
You're pretty proud of yourself?
Well, I think we've done pretty well, actually. We've come just on 700 miles and we've still got a few miles to go yet.
Would you take on a trip like this again?
I certainly wouldn't.
Chains 2 is expecting owner Bob Barnett to meet her with fuel. He's bought an old trawler in Albany, but she's lost in a squall. While Chains 2 sends up flares, Bob and his trawler, Saxon Onward, can't see them. And there's another problem. There's to be no fuel, but a tow. But suddenly, there she is, a welcome sight. And from her decks, a crewman with an Instamatic camera photographed one of the most amazing sights in modern times. These pictures, the only ones in existence, show a vessel never built for sailing under the incredible canvas that brought her 855 miles without power, a record for a steamer. As Saxon Onward comes alongside, bringing supplies for a ship almost without the basic necessities, flour, rice, coffee, cooking oil, cigarettes, a dramatic transfer.
Get away from there, you'll get bloody knocked off.
The rendezvous, 600 miles south of Albany, is timely. The wind has shifted and the sails are now useless. First attempts to secure a tow line fail when the line becomes fouled under Saxon Onward's rudder. Mate John Boys cuts the line.
Captain, please. Cigarette? Two. Hello. Very good.
Captain Mac relaxes as the tow is finally secured. But he's been under so much tension, he'll soon be a major source of concern. Meanwhile, Saxon Onward has a request. Can Chains 2 send a sail to her? A sail is packed.
Ready? 36. Go. Good boy. Sail. Snap.
Saxon Onward eventually has to cut her engines and drop back. The sail goes aboard. And for the expeditioners, it's been yet another adventure on the high seas. As Albany is approached, Captain Mac stops eating, stays in his cabin, fights for breath. Expeditioners keep vigil by his bunk while the crew seek medical advice by radio, and the captain's family is informed. While the captain sinks alarmingly, the crew finds a small amount of fuel remains in the tanks. Chains 2 is told to steam up with whatever fuel she has left and make a dash for the West Australian port. Saxon Onward manoeuvres within the vast harbour to shorten the tow line. Our medic comes aboard. A respirator is called for. And Captain Mac finds his breathing improving. But as the two vessels slide gently into Albany's deep-water jetty, the skipper is to make a premature departure from the ship that shouldn't have, but did. The jetty is too high for him, and he will transfer to a waiting boat that will take him to the Albany hospital.
Hi, Grumpy.
Happy to tears to be home on the ship that shouldn't have, Dominique, 6 months pregnant and spotting husband Sam and 13-month-old son Peter.
So big.
And suddenly, it's all over. Chains 2 is to be stripped, sold. Expeditioners, after many press interviews, have fled to jobs weeks late. Albany has greeted Chains 2 back as her own and is proud of the ship that shouldn't have.
I guess I'm an old-fashioned dreamer, walking the street on my own, out of date like the old-fashioned steamer, no longer feeling at home. But now the romance is gone, time races on, but I still remember town, the girls, the marvelous sailors, and the old Nickelodeon sound. The old cobblestone streets, echoes of weed like distant reminders of the town, the girls, the marvelous sailors, and the old Nickelodeon sound. There used to be all kinds of places where people like me used to go, full of rough but friendly old faces, looking for someone to know. But now